what we can do is have a way of looking at the way the water moves within the brain, and where pockets of water move in a particular way, we can derive information to show us where the tracks, the TRACK, so the tracks, they're not equivalent to the actual fibers, but it tracks the connections in the brain. So, sorry. This is our MRI radiographer. One of our problems with the research is we thought that the children might be a bit frightened of him, but they all love him. They call him Shrek. And he's so sweet with them. They now always bring him presents, and he is one of the reasons we're able to get on with the study. Kate makes a big effort for the children to know what's happening, to do preparation for them for the MRI scanner. And that's our MRI scanner, and that's Chrissy Robig there with her daughter. And we've now scanned 10 patients. This is some preliminary data. And what this shows is different colors mean different directions in the brain. And the B and C panels are looking at the brain sort of this way on. And we've taken a slice across two areas looking at particular circuits. The circuits, the MCP is a middle cerebral peduncle, and the SCP is the superior cerebral peduncle, and they basically make a motor circuit. So we're measuring the length of the fibers in the motor circuit, and we can see that in the you can actually see visibly in the AT brain, as you might expect, that you've lost the elongation of that signal on the right bottom panel. So I won't worry about that. So that's just the abstract of our 4 children and 4 controls that we did. Mainly we wanted to see that we could actually do the study and we had adequate sequences. It's a very, very complex area, MRI imaging, and we had some excellent talks in the previous meeting. Okay, so one of the things also we have available to do with Professor Lavin is that we have a 17 Tesla, which is incredibly powerful animal magnet, which allows us to look at 2 cellular layer thick and tracks in the animal brain. So if we do have a good model of neurological difficulty, then we can actually look at these animals in some detail, which is incredibly exciting. One of my main areas, I'm waiting, probably will wait for most of my career for molecular imaging to arrive, but this is going to be so interesting because then we will be able to put ligands into MRI scanners, a contrast agent, and actually look at biochemical epitopes on the surface of cells. There is an amazing amount of literature on this, but mainly still in animal models, but we are going to be using one of these ligands towards the end of the year. Okay. Recently I went to the Movement Disorders Congress in Dublin, and I was very interested to see with the late breaking abstracts that they published that this Spanish group have got a way towards looking at stem cells actually in the mouse cerebellum and assuring us that they are actually functioning as stem cells. In fact, I thought it was a late breaking abstract, but then I went back to the literature and this original study had been published at the end of 2010, so I wasn't quite sure what was incredibly new about it, but it is a huge leap forward compared to where everything was only a couple of years ago. Oh, whoops. The other thing which this clinical meeting is only the second clinical meeting we've had, and it is really exciting, and it's difficult as well because there's very fine detail science going on, and there are us clinicians and patients on the other end impatiently waiting for the scientists to give us something to work on. But In the Alzheimer's disease community, last year they announced that they'd made no progress in about 30 years of really a lot of money in terms of therapeutics. And what they were going to do to address this was to share their data, share their animal models, and share their trial designs. It's very tricky because competition is always incredibly important to drive the best sort of research, so it's difficult for us to do that. But in our very small field, we have to both look after each other and nurture each other's research, and also do the best we can with a limited pot of money. So hopefully communication and working together on good areas and having a mutual respect and support will be ongoing. I just wanted to also mention I'm part of a thing called the Australian Neuromuscular Network, and I learned some things from that too. We have an amazing database where we upload all the details, which I know Professor Gatti already has for so many patients with AT. But it's a great collaboration all across Australia, and it's allowed us to be in a very good position for imminent clinical trials, as the patient's data is very well characterized. And I would argue for a clinical global database for us, but that is always never easy. Okay. One of the difficulties which the TreatNMD website, TreatNMD, which is really headed up by Katie Bushby from Newcastle, is that, and this is really applicable to AT, there have been rapid developments in the neuromuscular field, so and a surge in interest, promising results, but a lot of barriers. Translational research has faced a number of barriers, and I think these are barriers which are everywhere. For the patients, we don't have standardized care guidelines, and that would be also true of AT. Some Friedreich's Ataxia have some very simple guidelines they put together, which I think are very helpful. For the biomedical industry, identifying the investigators and sites with relevant expertise and accessing appropriate patient cohorts has been a really significant challenge. And for clinicians and researchers, the lack of support tools such as validated clinical outcome measures or standard operating procedures for research protocols has also held back therapeutic development. And William and Tom Crawford and a whole group have worked very, very hard on a clinical assessment tool, which many of you in this room will have to go through all the time, and certainly we have to go through it because we adopted your methods. So some people think it's a very elaborate and very long, but certainly we keep going, and I think people feel it's it's really critically important in AT. It's such a complex, diverse disease. So what the TreatNMD network has developed from its European roots to be a global organization, and that has been an enormous headache, I can see from the people that have organized it, but I think it's been incredibly important. It's brought together leading specialists, patient groups, and industry reps to ensure the preparedness for trials and the therapies of the future. So other things that we have troubles with, and I don't know if you have troubles with the UK, but clinical research for doctors is not at all well supported in Australia. It is in Melbourne and Sydney, but certainly Queensland is really not great. And Professor Berkovic, who's one of the foremost neurology researchers in Australia, has made a big plea for governments to actually support us. So it's difficult. Every clinician does AT as a small part of their workload, and I think if things are going to go forward, that should change in some way so that we can actually concentrate a bit more effectively on this very critical period of development for translational research. So global technology, I do a little bit with deep brain stimulation and sorry. Oh. Oh. Can I give you a talk, Carl? So, and in that field, the Koreans have made an incredible database, which includes the MRI data, the movement videos, the clinical data, the genetic data, and they use that both for their research and also to communicate with other countries. Yeah, next one. Yeah, thanks. So there are a number of the cerebral palsy register throughout Europe. There's 14 to 16 registers of cerebral palsy, and this has made an enormous difference in the epidemiology and driving the research that we need. So it certainly can be done. Okay. I'll just leave that out. So this is just the guidelines for Friedreich's ataxia, and I think some of those would be maybe helpful for our families. I don't know. I'd love anybody's comment to whether they think that some simple guidelines for families and treating doctors and pediatricians not versed in AT would be useful. I always put this up, but I think Professor Glyn Davis from Melbourne in the Boyer series lecture talked about research and its nature, and I just really, I think if you read this, it really is says how difficult it is. So research needs the best and most committed minds. It demands patience, integrity, and a willingness to take risks, a high tolerance of failure, since much will not work or not produce the hoped-for results. In a world of blind alleys, the research process demands we push towards acquiring new knowledge in spite of inevitable disappointments. And given this essential character, there's no point prescribing expected outcomes. Discovery cannot be planned or mandated, and researchers begin with a goal in mind, but the more complex the problem, the less certain the path. Hence the importance of multiple teams, competing approaches, different theories about an issue. The best way to have an idea, said Linus Pauling, is to have lots of ideas. The research community works best when many paths are explored simultaneously. Instant publication via the web also ensures that knowledge is spread quickly, and insights from one approach quickly informs teams elsewhere. And I was just listening to William and Naz saying that Carl's work was instantaneously all around the AT community in a matter of minutes. Through the logic of testing hypotheses, Karl Popper describes our successive, so we make our successive mistakes as quickly as possible and put them out of the way, and that's the way knowledge advances. Okay, so I've come to the end of this. If anybody would like to come visit us, we would love to see you. We have lovely, lovely activities for people of all different forms of mobility or otherwise. This is our south bank on the river. We actually have a beach on the river. Unfortunately, in our recent floods, it did all flood, but it's all been nicely cleaned up. And a lot of the people from the clinic who come from interstate enjoy this while they're in Brisbane. And this is a picture also of our very, very stunning barrier reef. And although I'm originally from England and did my original training here in Oxford, I do realize that we are extremely fortunate to have this beautiful, beautiful place. So maybe one day we will have one of our meetings and some of you will be able to come to our country as well. Thank you so much.